This special iDriveSoCal podcast on the history of the Volkswagen Beetle is brought to you by our dear friends at Ontario Volkswagen. Go to OntarioVW.com, or better yet, go meet them in person. I really love these guys and girls. Totally down to earth, straight shooting, good people. And they truly love their brand. Just ask General Sales Manager Shant Bashian about the mini Volkswagens in his driveway. Or talk to Service Advisor Jimmy Wilhide. He's got 8 VWs, and he plays a big part in a couple different Volkswagen car clubs right here in Southern California. It all started with the Bug. I hope you enjoyed this podcast as much as I enjoyed learning more about the Beetle's unique and fascinating history. Our thanks again to Ontario Volkswagen, and now, on with the podcast.
Ferdinand Porsche was commissioned by the German government in the 30s to build a vehicle that would be usable by families on the new network of autobahns. The government actually took deposits for these cars and built very, very few of them before the war, and the first actual Volkswagens themselves were made in 1946. And Volkswagen stands for People's Car. Originally it wasn't called the Beetle, it was called the Type 1.
Welcome to iDriveSoCal, the podcast all about mobility from the automotive capital of the United States, Southern California. Tom Smith here, and I am excited to be joined by Mark Gillies. Am I getting the name right?
You are indeed, yes.
Mark Gillies. As you can hear by the accent, he's not from Southern California. Mark is DC based now, but from England. And we are at Automobility LA, which is the press days of the LA Automotive Show. And Mark is the senior manager of product communications for Volkswagen of America. I got that right as well, right?
You did, yes, you did.
Fantastic. And the topic that we're talking about here is the history of the Volkswagen Beetle, the iconic, the legendary, the special place in everybody's heart, whether Slugbug, Beetle, Bug, what have you. So, Mark, thanks for joining me. I know you got a very busy schedule. We are at we're on the LA Auto Show floor, and it's being set up right now. So we're literally like in Volkswagen's like inner sanctum thing of their booth, and there's construction all around us getting ready for the LA Auto Show. So it's an exciting place to be right now.
Yeah, it's cool. It's always fun when you're doing the setup, although you're a bit worried you're going to get run over by a forklift truck or trip over a piece of wood and break your neck. So,
well, thanks again for joining me. So let's talk about. And by the way, so I like to bring you behind the scenes with all things media as it pertains to mobility as well as automotive. And tomorrow for the press, Volkswagen is putting on a breakfast with the Beetle. Is that something that you're coordinating, Mark, by chance, or you're going to be participating in, I'm sure?
I've been involved in a bit of it, yeah. I mean, every year they do a kick-off for the automotive media, and the people are actually at the show, and it's a bunch of food trucks and a themed display. And this year we took it over, and we've got about 40 vintage and modern Beetles with some owners coming along. We've got some pretty cool cars of our own dating back to 1946, so we'll have those on show.
That is going to be something, and that's something just for the press, or will the public be able to see that at any point during the show?
No, the public won't be able to see that. All they'll be able to see on the stand is we'll have a couple of old vehicles on the show stand.
Okay, all right. Well, if you're listening to this iDriveSoCal podcast, as always, be sure to go to iDriveSoCal.com, check out the post on the podcast. We will be sure to take pictures of all those awesome Beetles that they're going to be on display for the press exclusively tomorrow. So, with that being said, the history of the Beetle from the drawing board.
So the drawing board, basically, Ferdinand Porsche was commissioned by the German government in the 30s to build a vehicle that would be usable by families on the new network of autobahns, which were the high-speed, like, autoroutes that they were building at the time. And it was originally called the KDF Wagen. KDF stands for Kraft, Dirk Freude, or Strength Through Joy. And the government actually took deposits for these cars and built very, very few of them before the war. And essentially the factory was in place in a town called KDF-Stadt. And the Allies basically bombed it pretty heavily in World War II because it's in northern Germany, in the industrial heartland. And after the war, one of the great ironies is that after the war, the British Army, led by a Major Hurst, helped the Germans rebuild the factory because, again, it had been bombed. There were holes in the ceiling and all that kind of stuff. And the first actual Volkswagens themselves were made in 1946. And Volkswagen stands for people's car. And actually, the town of Wolfsburg was actually only called Wolfsburg after World War II, and it's named after a castle in the town. And the car was only called Volkswagen after World War II. So
the car is named after a town and a castle, or
no. The town is named after the castle, which is Wolfsburg. And the car is just named Volkswagen, the people's car.
But one could draw the name of the car all the way back to the castle?
Not really,
the Volks part, no?
No, but the thing is that when you look at a Wolfsburg edition, or even early Beetles, you'll see the Wolfsburg crest on the steering wheel, for instance.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. So sorry to interrupt. Carry on.
So that's the basic genesis behind the Beetle, as it's now called. But originally it wasn't called the Beetle. It was called the Type 1. And the Type 1 that Ferdinand Porsche designed was relatively simple. It's got like a backbone chassis, or semi-backbone chassis, with a flat-4 air-cooled engine. And it's got a semi-trailing arm rear suspension. A swing axle rear suspension and a semi-trailing arm front suspension. And actually, if you look at the front suspension, it's the same as we used on the Auto Union Grand Prix cars. So it's like Ferdinand Porsche Type IFS.
Wow.
So the car was very, very simple. It was designed to be cheap to maintain, cheap to build, cheap to run. And again, bulletproof reliability was part of the deal.
So 46 was the first production, but it was on plan before that, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. And then how long was it produced in Europe before it maybe even made its way to the UK, before it made its way to North America and United States specifically?
Well, the first two made their way to the States in 1949, and a Dutch guy called Ben Pon brought the cars over, and allegedly he sold them to pay his bills, basically. And Ben Pon's very interesting because he's the guy who supposedly sketched the first microbus. And the first microbus basically took Beetle running gear, and as we all know, you've got that lovable van on wheels.
Yeah.
So, one of the funny things that we've discovered, is that basically, if you think about it, everybody talks about platform design nowadays. But Volkswagen was doing that back in the 50s with the Beetle, which was the Type 1. Then you had the Type 2, which is the microbus. You had the Type 3, which is the 1500, the notchback and the coupe and the fastback rather. And you also had the Karmann gear, and they're all based on the same running gear, basically. So that's one interesting aspect. So the first ones came to the States in 49, and then Max Hoffman, who's
sorry, real quick. So you said literally, what was his name again? Pon?
Pon, P-O-N, Ben Pon.
Ben Pon. He brought two to the United States?
Yes, he did.
How does one just bring two vehicles to the U.S.? I mean, was he just a guy that went to Europe, bought a couple of cars, brought them here, and sold them?
No, he was a guy. He was a Dutch importer, but he was actually, funnily enough, before this show, I did a little bit of research with our history department.
Thank you.
It transpires that he was actually, if not in the pay of Volkswagen AG in Germany, but they definitely knew what he was up to, and they were helping him with some of the costs of bringing the cars to the States. And he kind of failed, but then Max Hoffman, who was a very well-known businessman, an importer in New York, started bringing them in, and then Volkswagen looked at this whole scheme in 1955 and decided, well, actually, we'll set up a national sales company. So Volkswagen, the national sales company, has been around for more than 60 years now.
So that's VW of
America,
who you work for currently.
Exactly, yeah.
So Ben and then Max. I mean, that was clearly business scheme, business plan in the works. They were trying to penetrate the United States market, right? Or was it more organic and kind of accidental?
No. They were trying to see if there was demand there, and obviously by 1955 the parent company had seen there was demand there. And you know, one of the amazing things about the Beetle is, I can't remember off the top of my head how many countries it was built in, but you know, it was one of the most assembled vehicles everywhere in the world. You know, and even if they didn't have a factory building them in places, there were these CKD or knockdown kits that were put together in places like Ireland. I think even in places like Iran. So.
I work very closely with one particular Volkswagen dealer, Ontario Volkswagen, here in a Los Angeles suburb of Ontario, California. They have some super hardcore Volkswagen guys that work both on the sales and service side of things, that have multiple VWs. And one of the service guy, Jimmy Wilhide, was telling me that for a short amount, because Volkswagen hasn't been available as a new production car here in the United States on and off for many, many years. But Jimmy was telling me that for a while, when Volkswagen Beetles weren't here, and Beetles specifically, I don't know if I just clarified that, but Beetles specifically, while they weren't available in the United States for some time, you could just cross the border into Mexico and go buy a Beetle. That was that current year. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, sure, because in fact, one of the things about the final edition we're showing here is that a couple of the colours are based on the Ultima Edition Beetle that was built in 2003, which was the last year they were built in Mexico. So actually, they were building Beetles in Mexico from the 60s until 2003.
Okay.
Which is why you could, if you wanted to, if you really wanted to give yourself a hard time, you could go to Mexico and buy one. And
that's how hardcore these guys are. So.
Yeah. and you know, those Beetles are kind of, we've got one in our collection, and they're really cool because they're a lot more, they're a lot less Spartan than the Beetles that came to the States. I mean, they've got more amenities than the ones that, even the last editions that came to the US.
So, quick sidebar. The Beetle came to the United States in '49 with Ben,
yeah.
And then Max started bringing them in more official, regular quantity or velocity.
Yeah.
What year was that again?
From memory, I think it was like 52, somewhere around there.
So then, do you know when the first Volkswagen dealership came about in the United States?
I don't, to be honest. I think, again, but once, you know, VW had set up in 1955, then most of the dealers would have started popping up around then.
Right. Now, another quick sidebar. When Volkswagen started coming, was it just the Beetle, or was the Type 2, as we know, the bus, also part of that equation, or when did that become?
The Type 2 came in around the same time, yeah, because the first transporters were built in, I think, 1950, and the one we've got on the stand, I think, is a 53. So,
by transporter, you mean
Type 2.
Okay.
So that's the panel van version of the microbus.
Got it. Okay.
And again, it typically they never really called the microbus was never really called the microbus anywhere except the States. But again, you know, if you look at catalogues dating from the first days of the official importing, Type 1 and the Type 2 were offered at the same time.
Now, the Beetle here in the States was 40. What we say 49 was when Ben brought it, and then Max started doing it in 52-ish. And then when was the first time that it wasn't? Because it was that was a long stretch, right? That it was available, and then there was a little pocket that it wasn't, and then another spurt of sales. Do you know when it was on and off sale here in the United States specifically?
So it was on sale. It was from when Hoffman was selling it. It was basically on sale from 49 until the late 70s.
Okay.
And then obviously there was a hiatus until you get to the new Beetle in 1998, which obviously is the retro-inspired front-wheel drive, front-engine car that we remember. And actually that car was on sale until we were selling the last ones in 2010. And the current generation went on sale in 2011. So officially it had gone out of production by 2010, but there were still some vehicles on lots.
So it was back in the day. Originally, it was rear-wheel drive, rear engine.
Yep.
And then when it went away in late 70s, came back in early 80s as front-wheel drive, front engine until 2010. And then it came back in. That's what's available on the road right now, right?
Yeah, correct.
In dealerships right now, and that is actually. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that a Golf platform?
It's not the current Golf platform, but it's the previous Golf platform.
Okay.
So there are two designations of platform for our compact cars in the States. One is the so-called PQ platform, and PQ underpins the Beetle. And the more modern platform, which came in on the Golf in 2012, is the MQB platform.
Okay.
So it's a slightly older platform, but it's essentially the same as Golf, and it was also shared platform with Seats and Skodas and some Audis as well.
And now we're rounding the third base here on 2018, going into 2019. The Beetle is going to be available in the United States while supplies last. Do we have an estimated time? Because 2019, by the time we're this time next year, there's not going to be any more Beetles in dealerships, right?
No, there shouldn't be, because basically the end of production is some point, I think, at the moment, around July 2019. So the 2019 model year is the final Beetle, and that's one of the reasons we brought out the final edition, to sort of commemorate the fact that the car's on its way out.
And let's so the 2019s, are they available in dealerships right now?
They are, yeah.
Okay. And let's talk about, I think there's just a couple of trims available, and they're special, as you just mentioned. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So there are two trim lines of final edition. There's the SE and the SEL, and both are available as convertible and coupe. And basically they hark back again to the past. You know, we've got a couple of special colors. There's a blue and a beige that
better the retro kind of feeling.
Yeah, but they also mimic the Mexican final editions of the original Beetle. There's a lot of chrome on them. There's cool wheels. We've got quilted leather in the SEL and quilted cloth, which is an interesting one, because the product planner for Beetle way back when the car was around in 2012, he always wanted to put Bentley type seats in, and unfortunately he's not around, but he's got his wish eventually.
Not around at the company, or not around on the planet
not around
anymore?
At the company, actually.
Oh, okay. But he's still alive to know that it's happening, right?
Yeah. He's a big VW fan. He actually runs a website that does car reviews and pricing, basically.
Oh, okay. There you go. So the trims, was the Dune a 2018, or is that a 2019?
That was a 17, I think.
A 17?
Yeah.
Okay, I just saw my first one on the road not too long ago.
Hang on, I get confused sometimes, but
it's got a special interior and exterior.
No, it was 2 years. It was 2 years ago, so it would have been. No, you're right. It's 18. It would have been 18. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to say I just saw one of those at my friends out at Ontario Volkswagen, and that car was really cool because it is retro, and it's kind of interesting because that is retro of the Dune buggy, but the Dune buggy was never something that Volkswagen actually made. It was just something that the hardcore enthusiasts of the vehicle did with it, right? Here in Southern California.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, you know, the idea behind the Dune was to try and capture a little bit of the vibe of the Baja bugs, and of course, VW had nothing to do with Baja bugs back in the 60s, or to do with Myers-Manx either, of course, which was, you know, Bruce Myers' Dune buggy built off a VW floor pan. So, yeah, I mean, one of the cool things about this vehicle, the current third generation Beetle, all the way along, is we wanted to do some special editions to try and keep the interest in the vehicle alive. So the Dune was one. We did the pink Beetle. And we also did a GSR version, which stands for Gelb Schwarz Renner, or Green Yellow Racer. And that, again, was an evocation of a sort of classic 70s limited edition. I wouldn't say really sporty Beetle, but more of a boy racer Beetle that was available in Germany. But it's very highly prized now because they've made very few of them, and it's got this very distinctive yellow and black paint scheme and really cool Porsche-style wheels.
So, that it just brings up a thought. What is the most and this is a total trivia question you couldn't have prepared for, but maybe you know. What is the most valuable Beetle market value that you've ever heard of? And I know obviously the market fluctuates from time, with all the various factors that impact the market, but there's some pretty. Do you know?
It's difficult to know. I mean, I've seen some really big numbers quoted for really, really early cars, i.e. pre-war Beetles. So anything pre-war or anything built during the war, because they were used as military staff cars in the war.
We talking hundreds of thousands? Are we talking?
You're talking multiple hundreds of thousands of what people ask for those.
Are we getting into seven figures? We getting into $1 million or not quite?
I've seen people asking $500,000 plus for those.
Okay.
Some of the really early cars, really early 40s cars, they're getting into the 100,000+ range, maybe up to 200,000. And some of the more special things, like we own a Hebmuller convertible, which is a special-bodied Beetle, like a speedster. And we also have a 1952 Carmen convertible that was a Berlin show car. And those cars, they're very, very rare, the early cars. I mean, again, anything super early in good condition is six figures these days.
By we, do you mean Volkswagen of America or you and your wife?
No, we as in the company.
Okay, gotcha. So, Volkswagen has a cult-like following, and then the niche vehicles within Volkswagen, i.e. the Beetle, has that as well. The fact that Volkswagen came out with a Dune, I think, really illustrates that, because here's the company over here putting out a product that gets so well received that it gets a fan base that does this crazy stuff with it, and then a few decades later, the company says, hey, you know what? What our crazy fan base did, not crazy in a bad way, crazy in a good way, we're going to actually add to that and put it out as something new. So with that in mind, it illustrates the popularity of the Beetle. And obviously it's going away right now because maybe it's not selling so good, whatever. But you know what? My bet, and we talked about this off mic just a minute, and I told you I was going to bring it back because you're going to get this a lot. When is the Beetle coming back? Because there's too much there.
Well, we've been basically saying all the way along, this is the end of the Beetle. We would never say never. I think it was, if you look at the ID Buzz that we showed in Detroit last year, which is a full electric vehicle, that's a reincarnation of the microbus. So there's nothing in the plans for sure, and I see the cycle plans. But I'd never say never. That's as much as as far as you can go.
And that's what some others, such as myself, that are kind of in this space, like, okay, the bus is going to come out all electric. That means the Beetle's getting prepped to come out all electric as well. But even if that's on, perhaps, would you tell me? Because it's just me and you talking here, Mark.
Yeah.
That's it.
If I knew, I might, but I don't know.
I believe you. Well, hey, Mark, thank you so much. Mark Gillies, right?
Great.
Senior Manager, Product Communications, Volkswagen of America, here at Automobility LA. Before I completely wrap it up officially, is there anything else that you'd like to add about the Beetle that we didn't touch on?
No, the one thing we didn't touch on is it's actually the most built single platform car ever, if you think about it. The Model T was the most manufactured car until the Beetle came along. They built, Ford built 15 million of those, and Volkswagen has built more than 20 million Beetles in the lifetime of the car. And other manufacturers will say, oh, well, we've built more Corollas, and I think we say we've built more Golfs, but nobody's built more of one actual iteration of a car. If you get
Beetle,
where, yeah,
not when you put the rear engine rear wheel drive plus the front engine front wheel drive plus the Golf version.
No, I'm talking
and globally.
I'm just talking about the first edition.
Really?
The single most cars built off a single platform, basically. And then when you look at the new Beetle, we made about 1.2 million of those. And to date, we've made somewhere around 500,000 of the third generation. But when it comes to single most built car, if it's in its own iteration, because all other manufacturers say, oh, we've built, 23 million, I don't know, Civics or whatever.
Right.
But that's 7 or 8 different cars, whereas the Beetle was always essentially one car.
Now, when you say we, again, are you speaking of, in those numbers, that the 500,000 number that you just put out, was that just Volkswagen of America, or is that global?
That's global, yeah.
Okay.
Global, yeah.
So all in globally, the Beetle has sold how many units?
Somewhere, just from memory, it's around 22.5 to 23 million.
Okay. Yeah, and it's not coming back. Come on. Come on, Mark. All right, well, cool. Now, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
That was it, I think.
All right, because I'm certain that there's plenty of people that want to hear anything else that you have to share about the Beetle.
I mean, again, I think, we always talk about it. It's very iconic. People love the shape. And, there have been so many things done with it over the years, like, contests to see how many people you can get in a Beetle. People have, floated them across seas like the Irish Sea. I don't think there's much that hasn't been attempted in a Beetle. So, yeah, it's one of those cars. It's a great, great car, and it's just fair to say it's a complete automotive icon. I mean, I work for a company, and, I'm paid to say things like that. But again, I'm also a real car nut. I have lots of cars of my own, and that's one of the great things about the car is it's a regular, anybody around the world can recognize it. And it's actually funny because, I was in South Africa at the weekend, just on a whim, to race an old car, and you still see Beetles there. But what's more interesting is I've never seen as many Mark I Golfs in one town in my life as there were in East London in South Africa. And, car enthusiasts are car enthusiasts everywhere. And we're rolling out the circuits, and there's all these young kids, multicultural kids rolling in with their slammed Golfs with wide tyres and, whatever. So, I mean, and I think, I think the Golf, to a certain extent, the spirit of the Beetle lives on in a little bit in the Golf with the tuner generation. So
sure. And, the Beetle, as you were just explaining that, the Beetle just, especially the older ones, they just, when people see them, and especially one that's well maintained, it makes people smile. Yeah. They have a yellow one out here near the entrance of the auto show. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's not even a Volkswagen promotion. It's a car company, a rental company, Toro, the rental company where, hey, I own a car, I can put it on their platform, and you can peer-to-peer car rental. So it's a Toro ad, but it's just a yellow Beetle. And I saw 3 different people, younger people, probably 20s, run up and taking selfies with the Beetle. I guarantee they're not taking selfies because it has the Toro banner in the windshield. But so okay, Mark Gillies, Senior Manager, Product Communications. I always want to get that turned around. Senior Manager, Product Communications, Volkswagen of America. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you joining me. Beetle, literally get them while supplies last, right?
Pretty much. And there's a movie coming out as well soon, December the 9th, where the Beetle is the main character, but I can't tell you more than that.
Come to the LA Auto Show and you'll be greeted by the main character, I think. All right, well, fantastic. Mark, again, thank you. Very much appreciated. For iDriveSoCal, I am Tom Smith. Thank you, as always, for tuning in.
This episode was engineered and edited by Bobby Flores. Howdy. Still here, huh? That's cool, but this one's pretty much done. But we have tons of additional content at our website, iDriveSoCal.com. If you're not listening from there already, you should definitely check it out. From there, you can subscribe to our newsletter, the podcast, or leave a note. And I'd love to hear from you, too. Here's my email, tom@iDriveSoCal.com. That's Tom, Tom, @ iDrive, the letter I, drive like drive a car, SoCal like Southern California.com. Tom at iDriveSoCal.com. Thanks again for listening, and please reach out with whatever's on your mind.